Hey all you beautiful people. In this video we are going to analyze the poem Still I Rise, written by one of my favorite poets and writers, Maya Angelou. Make sure you have a copy of the poem close at hand to make notes as we work through the poem. Born in 1828, Maya Angelou was an African-American woman who was subjected to terrible oppression and inequality. Although slavery had been long abolished, Angelou saw its effects on society and on the African American people. Her grandmother, Mary Lee, was a slave who had been physically and mentally harassed by her owner. At the age of 7, she was raped by someone close to the family. Following this horrendous event, she became mute, but later gained her confidence back and started speaking again. Her life reflects her belief that she should be regarded as unique and special. She was never bound by the conventional rules set by society. She worked as a mechanic, a club dancer, and a cook. She became the first black female streetcar conductor in San Francisco. She was also the first black female Hollywood director. Maya was introduced to literature at the age of 16. She won several national and international awards and was the recipient of 50 honorary degrees. She advocates the potential and strong spirit that women possess and that black people is beautiful and diverse. Through her work, she strives to strengthen women and to educate them to embody a strong spirit. This poem is a declaration that she, for one, would not allow the hatefulness of society to determine her own success. The poem also serves as a call to others to live above the society in which they were brought up. This poem was written in 1978. Now that we know a bit more about this amazing poet, let's read the poem. In fact, let's allow Maya to read her own poem to us. Take it away, Maya.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Just because I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just because I laugh, as if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words, you can cut me with your lies, you can kill me with your hatefulness, but just like life, I rise. Does my sexiness offend you? Oh. Does it come as a surprise that I dance as if I have diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling and bearing in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear I rise. Into a daybreak miraculously clear I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dream of the slave. And so, wow. There I go.
Okay, so she did not recite the poem exactly as the original one. But hey, you gotta love the attitude. What story does this poem tell us? Remember, in the previous video we said that every poem tells a story, and if you know the story, analyzing the poem becomes much easier. This poem is directed towards those oppressors in society who would tie the speaker to a past and to a history that has been misrepresented and cannot be relied upon. She is saying that those people who wrote down the history were biased and did not give a true account of events. Her ancestors were depicted unfairly and dishonestly in history, yet she will rise above the cruelty and suffering they experienced. The speaker is both angry and confident throughout the poem. Initially, she is baffled by the way in which her oppressors, specifically white males, do not want her to succeed or become more than the sum of her history. She notes that her joy seems to make them miserable, and she questions why that is. At the same time, she taunts these oppressors, acknowledging the impact of her behaviors and personality and delighting in the fact that she bewilders them with her power and confidence. The poem as a whole is a declaration of strength and of determination. The speaker proclaims boldly that whatever her oppressors do to try to hamper her progress or take away her rights, it will not matter. Nobody will ever take her power away, and she will always rise above the racism, pain, and sexism to be the powerful woman she knows she is. She will break the negative cycle of the past. She also speaks on behalf of other Black people without actually stating that this is what she is doing. By making references to her ancestors and naming slavery explicitly near the poem's conclusion, she's addressing the collective experiences of her people and stating that they, as a race, are more powerful than their oppressors. Whatever the oppressors do, they cannot stop her people from moving forward in their lives. The poet ends her declaration by affirming that no matter what happens, she will continue to rise above history, hate, and bigotry, just like her ancestors dreamed would be possible. She will fulfill their dreams and hopes for freedom and happiness. The poet actually tells 3 different stories. The story of slavery and the horrible things done to the African race, as well as the suffering and oppression slaves had to endure. She also tells the story of someone standing up against all difficult circumstances, and of one who has hope for the future. And finally, she tells the story of a woman who is proud of her femininity. She will not allow anyone to think that she's inferior to men. Once again, I have written down a few words from the poem that you need to know with their basic definitions. There might be more words that you struggle with. Feel free to read through the poem and pause the video and add those words to your list. What type of poem is this? This poem is a lyric. Lyric poetry expresses personal emotions or thoughts of the speaker, just like the songs of today. Also, just like songs, lyric poems always have a musical quality or a specific melody which is easy for you to sing along with. In this poem, the poet expresses her feelings about oppression and sexism. The poem has a song-like rhythm, and the refrain, "Still I Rise," is repeated like the chorus of a song. The themes of the poem. The theme is the underlining message that the writer or artist wants to convey. In this poem, the speaker wants to convey the struggle to overcome prejudice and injustice, yet through it all she remains hopeful for a better future. She shows strength, determination, and resilience in the face of oppression. No matter the cruelty, and regardless of method and circumstances, the victim will rise up. The slave will overcome adversity. In this poem lies a message to all innocent victims, minorities, and the oppressed, not to give in to torture, bullying, humiliation, and injustice, because pride and hope cannot be taken away from one. Pride is one's culture, and hope for the future are the victories of oppressed people. She also addresses physical wealth, financial riches, versus spiritual wealth, happiness, health, and optimism. Maya urges all oppressed women to not only survive, but also to thrive by rising up against their oppressors. We can conclude that there are 5 main themes evident in this poem: deviance, resilience or determination, hope, racial prejudice, confidence or perseverance, and finally, history or changes in time. You need to know the different themes, not just one. You can be asked questions like, discuss the theme of determination as it appears in the poem, or discuss how the theme of perseverance is evident in this poem. Or even a question like, state the speaker's opinion of history relates to one of the themes in the poem. These questions can be seen as longer questions and will count for 3 marks each. Therefore, you need to know the themes by heart. Let's look at the first one: deviance, resilience, determination. The story of racial legacy is that of struggle and overcoming. This poem covers both those ideas. The poet talks about the struggle born out of oppression, as well as the overcoming. Rather than giving up, the poet demonstrates a resilient, deviant spirit. The frequent repetition of "I'll rise" illustrates the poet's determination to remain resilient. The message that the poet wants to bring home to the reader is a strength to strike back against the discrimination of race and gender. This offers hope and courage for others who suffer from the same ordeal. When I think of resilience, I always see the image of a bouncy ball. Those small rubber balls that has the ability to bounce very high with just a little bit of effort. Resilience means no matter what life throws at you, you will always bounce back. Hope. Although the speaker has been through pain and suffering in her past, she feels excited about the future. She is a symbol of hope to other African women who have gone through the pain of oppression. Racial prejudice. The speaker's opinion of history is that it is not a true account of events because it is written from the oppressor's point of view. The cruel lies are informed by racial prejudice. The oppression faced by the speaker is linked to the history of racism. The fact that the speaker calls herself a black ocean is significant because this is an overt reference to race, showing that the boundary between you and I in the poem is linked to a racial distinction. She condemns racism and speaks about a universal idea, overcoming prejudice of any kind that transcends geographical boundaries or the color of one's skin. Confidence or perseverance. Despite the hardship, the speaker is confident to rise above her circumstances. Throughout the poem, the speaker makes the point that nothing that the oppressors have done to African Americans all these years will stop them from overcoming their obstacles and succeeding. This is resonated in the phrase, "like dust" and "like air I'll rise." The poem reflects the universal idea that no matter what comes your way, the determination to rise is evident. History or changes in times. The speaker is an African American woman who is subjected to slavery. She is determined to fighting back against racial prejudice and the leftover of slavery that Black Africans have endured for many years. The speaker's opinion of history, as already stated, is that it is not a true account of events because it is written from the historian's point of view. When the speaker reflects on her past, the shameful act of slavery imposed on her ancestors brings back painful memories. The tone. In general, the tone is deviant, as if the speaker is trying to prick the conscience of the oppressor by reminding them of past wrongs and present realities. She is determined to be heard, no matter how uncomfortable her audience may be with her message. Although at times the narrator's tone is playful and humorous, it is also very strong and powerful. The tone of the stanzas varies from being serious and grave to patronizing and confidently playful. For example, In stanza 2, 5, and 7, the narrator's tone is humorous and patronizing. However, in stanzas 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9, the speaker's tone is more serious and prideful. The tone in stanza 1 can also be seen as accusatory. The word sassiness in line 5 suggests an arrogant self-confidence backed up by the use of haughtiness, line 17, and sexiness, line 25. In stanzas 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9, the significance and severity of her tone overpowers the humor. For example, in the first stanza, the narrator says, "You may write me down in history," line 1. This gives a feeling of determination, as though the narrator is accepting a challenge that despite the difficulties, she will still rise. Then, in stanza 3 and 4, the tone is once again proud and serious. The third stanza carries the same confident tone, assuring that she will overcome her troubles, just like the moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, line 9 and 10. The same rhetorical device from previous stanzas is used in the fourth stanza, but in this case it creates a more dramatic tone. The narrator, knowing that her bullies want to see her broken, line 13, with bowed head and lowered eyes, line 14. In the sixth stanza, the same tone of pride and strength present in the previous stanzas is also present here. The determination the narrator possesses shown through her promise to always rise. In the seventh stanza, although the narrator uses sarcasm, the stanza also conveys a sense of pride. This shows that the narrator of the poem associates her sexuality as something valuable, as though she has diamonds at the meeting of my thighs, lines 27 and 28, which upsets her tormentors. In the last couple of stanzas, more seriousness is added to the tone by using historical imagery and the statement that she is the dream and the hope of the slaves, line 40. The assertive sentences establish a tone of independence and resilience. They demonstrate the poet's qualities of unwavering courage and confidence. Her assertive tone is reflected by the numerous questions she asked. Rather than whining about their circumstances, Angelou uses an assertive tone to urge her readers to change their behavior and outlook towards life. This gives her readers, especially female readers, the encouragement they require to go out into the world and get what they want. Ultimately, the poem's tone, as the title suggests, is triumphant. Let's have a quick look at the structure. As already stated, this is a lyric. It has a free verse rhyme scheme. A free verse is a type of poetry that does not contain patterns of rhyme or meter. Free verse is considered an open form of poetry, as opposed to poetry written in structure or form, and tends to follow natural speech patterns and rhythms. The free verse rhyme scheme gives the poem a very definite spirit and energy, as does the repetition of key lines. It is also a non-narrative short poem. The poem is written from a first-person perspective. Unlike narratives or epics, it contains no plot or story, but focuses solely on the narrator's feelings and ideas. The speaker. The speaker is an African-American woman willing to speak up for herself, for other women, and even for her black ancestors who were slaves. This is proved where the narrator says, "Does my sassiness upset you?" line 5. Or, "Does my sexiness upset you?" line 25. And, "That I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs," line 27 and 28. Sassiness and sexiness is a quality normally attributed to females. Also, diamonds are often given to women as gifts. Thus, we can conclude that the speaker is indeed a woman. She has endured unthinkable acts of cruelty, yet her inner strength has helped her to rise above her circumstances. She is the voice of the free, idolized Black American woman. The audience. The speaker addresses her oppressors as well as the oppressed. She uses the second person pronoun you and your 15 times throughout the poem, which grabs the reader's attention with an accusatory tone, causing the reader to acknowledge that they may play a part in oppressing others in their own lives. This makes the poem all the more personal, and the tone she uses throughout the poem to express her feelings and opinion on the matter supports the accusatory tone of the you. The poem is addressed to anyone attempting to keep her down, but specifically white oppressors of Black persons and or sexist men. Most readers are likely to feel immense sympathy with her spirited rejection of future oppression. She also addresses the oppressed. The poem speaks to anyone who has ever had to overcome hardship, oppression, and sexism. She truly hopes that her poem will motivate these people to stand up for themselves. The title. The title of the poem, Still I Rise, suggests hope and confidence the speaker has despite the hardships she is facing. The title is most likely speaker-centered. Literally, the words of the title mean picking oneself up from the ground or to move from a lower position to a higher one. Figuratively, the words could mean lifting your spirits, aspirations, goals, or dreams. The expression rise to the occasion may also come to mind. For example, behaving in an exceptional way under certain circumstances. Let's quickly discuss the poem stanza by stanza. Stanza 1. In this stanza, Angelou says that the oppressors, the you, of Black women have presented a distorted or a twisted view of them throughout history by means of various lies informed by racial prejudice, hatred. The use of you is important. It is not simply a private lyric meditation. Maya Angelou gives of her heart and soul to declare that nothing and no one could oppress her or keep her down. This is a Black woman that is willing to speak up for herself. The first kind of oppression the speaker mentions is an oppression rooted in writing. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. The poem itself is a direct response to this kind of oppressive writing. She doesn't care what the history book says. The first reference to physical defeat is in line 3. You may tread me in the very dirt. But the phrasing is more metaphorical than literal. Metaphorically, to tread another person into the dirt is to treat that person with enormous disrespect. She will not let it bother her that others tread her in the very dirt. She proclaims that if she's trodden in the dirt, that she will rise like dust. The reference to dust is effective. It implies that something normally seen as merely bothersome can actually possess a kind of resilience and strength. Angelou as an individual and Black women as a collective will not be pushed into the dirt any longer. Instead, they will all dislodge themselves like dust rising in the wind. They will defy their oppressors to rise their heads and make their presence felt. The word you refers to the oppressors. The poet speaks directly to her oppressors. This is called an apostrophe. An apostrophe is a figure of speech in which some absent or non-existent person or thing is addressed as if present and capable of understanding. Speaking directly to her oppressors forces her oppressors to admit that they are racist. History refers to what happened to her and her people in the past, the slavery, violence, and discrimination they had to endure. She makes use of strong, harsh verbs to indicate how aggressive the ruling white classes were. The speaker's opinion of history is that it is not a true account of events because it is written from the historian's or oppressor's point of view. The cruel lies are informed by racial prejudice. The blacks were misrepresented, and the history one learns is not necessarily a true reflection of the facts. Tread me in the very dirt means to treat someone without respect. This is a metaphor. The speaker states that even if her oppressor tries to trample on her as one might trample an object or living creature in the dirt, she will still rise. The speaker is not literally squashed by the oppressor, but the oppressor nonetheless tries to trample on her spirit. The word "but" brings a change in the tone as we realize she is powerful, resilient, and deviant. The word "like" indicates to us that line 4 contains a simile. No matter what the speaker's oppressors do to harm her, she will rise above the challenges, just as air rises. She intends to use her opposition to her own benefit, as it will be her inspiration to stand up to it. She is resilient. Stanza 2. Stanza 2. In the second stanza, the speaker asks a question. This is an interesting question as she refers to her own tone as sassiness and asks the hearer if her sassy tone is upsetting. She noticed that the people around her in her society are beset with gloom when she succeeds. This could be referring to the fact society is obsessed with her being a black woman, which blinds them from seeing her success. Then, Angelou goes on to define exactly how her sassiness looks to the outside world, and in doing so, she evokes an amusing image, that of oil wells pumping in her living room. Angelou implies that her oppressors sought to bring her down by emphasizing her poverty. She questions this. She knows that she has succeeded in life, in her writing and as a woman. The oil wells pumping in her living room symbolizes her success. Stanza 2 has a confident tone of voice. The word sassiness means cheeky confidence or charisma. She could be seen to be rude, but she's deviant, spirited, and bold. In these lines, the speaker uses rhetorical questions to further express her emotions. She is confident. With a rhetorical question, no answer is needed. The challenging attitude continues as she directly confronts the reader. First, she refers to her sassiness, and then she asks why they are so beset with gloom. We see another simile in line 7. We all know that you can walk with a sassy attitude. She now compares her way of walking to the richness of having oil wells that are pumping in her living room. Do they think that because she is from Africa, that there is something she has that they don't? There is always a slight undertone of the sensual present in the poem. She might not have money, but she walks with the attitude of a rich person. Oil wells is an image of wealth, success, and pride. The word pumping indicates a continuous flow. She had more than enough. The words sassiness, oil wells, and pumping symbolizes her value and success. She compares herself to somebody who has as much pride as those who have endless financial resources. She has pride in her body, her sexiness, and her culture. We know that her oppressors do not like to see her succeed. Stanza 3. In this stanza, Angelou switches to future tense to show that she and all other African American women will continue to rise inevitably. And just how inevitable will this be? As surely as the movement of the moon and the sun, and consequently the occurrence of high tides and low tides, black women will stand up for the respect they deserve. She compares herself to the moon and the sun as they are affected by the tides. This gives the reader the understanding that the speaker has no other choice but to rise up out of her affliction. Try as society might to keep her oppressed, it is in her nature to rise up and stand against oppression, just as it is the nature of the tides to respond to the moon. Stanza 3's tone is triumphant, just like moons and like suns in line 9, and just like hopes springing high in line 11 are all similes. There is one thing we need to know and understand. She will rise like the moon will rise every night, like the sun will come up, and the two together will make the tides come in and out in the sea. Every 6 hours she will rise. Like hope, she will rise. The one thing that makes us human is hope, and that will never stop. We cling to it, and when we have it, there is no stopping us. She will not change or be influenced. Even their best efforts to keep her down will not succeed. It is natural for her to always rise. It is inevitable. It is in her nature. The words moons and suns are imagery of nature, used to emphasize her invincibility and strength. The words still I'll rise are repeated in line 12. The repetition of these words drive home a point. It builds up to a climax, making the point familiar enough to keep it in the reader's mind. The repetition shows the intensity of her resolve not to let anybody determine the outcome of her life. She will not be held down by the forces of gender, race, or economic oppression. She intends to leave the past in the past and to become all that she has ever dreamed of becoming. She uses the words as a kind of mantra to motivate her to stay strong. It emphasizes her resilience and creates a song-like effect. Stanza 4. The speaker's questions in this stanza are direct and appropriately accusing. She knows that her own success is received with bitterness by the racist people in her society. So, she directs these questions at the society that has long tried to keep her oppressed. She asks them if they want to see her broken, oppressed, depressed, and bitter. She asks these questions knowing that this indeed is what many in society wanted. They did not want to see a black woman rise up out of the oppression of her society and succeed. They expect her to bow her head down and lower her eyes, looking at the ground with shoulders drooping in despair. They expect her to speak in a weakened voice. The speaker knows this, and she draws attention to it with these revealing yet cutting questions. Stanza 4 has a tone of direct accusatory. It is obvious that those who have tried to oppress her do not like that she is successful. She knows that her own success is received with bitterness by racist and sexist males in her society. She exposes their attempts at oppression by openly challenging them. She asks them directly if they want to see her broken, oppressed, depressed, and bitter, knowing that most oppressors are cowards who would not openly admit to racism or sexism. They would like to see her with a servant-like attitude. Society expects her to bow her head down and lower her eyes with shoulders drooping in despair. They expect her to speak in a weakened voice. She must be a trained and tamed wild animal. Her physical look of body must reflect how they would like to see her. See me broken in line 13 is a metaphor. The speaker refers to a broken spirit, emotional suffering, not her literally being broken in half. The rhetorical questions used emphasizes the speaker's awareness that her success is received with bitterness by the oppressors. The image of her shoulders hanging down like teardrops is vivid, and one immediately pictures this in your mind. This is a simile. The downward movement of the speaker's shoulders when she is sad is compared to teardrops that fall or roll down. The speaker refers to being sad to the point that one's shoulders droop down or collapse just as tears fall. Stooped shoulders and teardrops are signs that a person has given up hope, which is what her oppressors are trying to bring about. She, however, is deviant and refuses to give up. Stanza 5. The fifth stanza again asks a pair of pointed questions like the second stanza. Slowly, the reader sees a pattern emerging in the structure of the poem. Angelou asked whether her pride offends her oppressors. The speaker continues in a sarcastic tone as she pretends to comfort the hearer. She says, "Don't you take it awful hard?" This is her sarcastic way of pretending to care for those who resent her success. Once again, Angelou follows up her questions with a humorous image, this time of gold mines dug up in her own backyard. She continues, however, to, in a sense, flaunt her success before the society that has always oppressed her. She claims that she has gold mines and that she laughs at the success she has found. The tone is, you guessed it, sarcastic. Haughtiness means pride and confidence. It annoys and confuses them that she keeps her pride regardless of their attempts to break her. If we were to translate line 17 using our own words, we would ask, is my pride offensive? Gold mines, just like oil wells in stanza 2, are symbols of wealth. It is something Black Americans were not able to have for themselves. They did not own gold mines and oil wells. They would be employed to work in such places, but never shared in any of the wealth. In line 19 and 20 is yet another simile. The speaker laughs with the confidence of someone who is wealthy, as if gold has been discovered in her own backyard. She may not be wealthy in a financial sense, but she possesses a great wealth of spirit and hope. Stanza 6. In this stanza, she outlines the various violent methods, shoot, cut, kill, adopted by her oppressors to bring her down. Whether it is their harsh words, their cruel looks, or their hatred for black women, she lets society know that no matter what it does to oppress her, it will not succeed. She proclaims that society cannot prevail against her, even if it managed to have her killed because of its hatefulness. She has an invincible strength that is invincible to the oppressor. She claims that she will still, like air, rise. The words you and your may refer to the reader or to white Americans. The repetition of you and your shows the distance between them, the judgment they have over her. This emphasizes what they have done to her. The words shoot, cut, and kill are violent verbs. The speaker outlines the various violent methods, shoot, cut, and kill, adopted by her oppressors to bring her down. Whether it is their harsh words, their cruel looks, or their hatred towards her. However, she lets her oppressors know that no matter what they do to oppress her, they will not succeed. The strong verbs reveal the extent of their hatred. You may shoot me with your words is a metaphor. The speaker refers to the violence of shooting with a gun, but she uses the metaphor to illustrate instead the pain of her oppressor's hateful language. Another metaphor is when the speaker says that she will not be pierced by the harshness of his words. The speaker refers to violence again, this time using the example of cutting as with a knife. However, she refers to the oppressor's cruel looks as so painful. The oppressor's hatefulness could literally kill her, but in this line, the speaker speaks of death metaphorically. The oppressor's hate towards her might kill her spirit, but she will still rise above the pain. In the last line of this stanza, she uses another simile. The speaker is determined to succeed. Air will always be there and rise. That is what she compares herself to. Stanza 7. The speaker continues her questioning of society. using rhetorical questions. By this time in the poem, it becomes apparent that the speaker has placed society on trial and is now in the process of cross-examination. She knows the answer to these questions, but to ask them is to incriminate the offender. While she asks incriminating questions, she simultaneously reveals incredible self-confidence as a woman, despite the oppression of society. The speaker continues to use rhetorical questions to celebrate her sexuality. These questions emphasizes her sensuality, sexuality, richness, and content. The wording is designed to make the biased reader feel uncomfortable. This also reveals her incredible self-confidence despite the oppressor's view of her. Just like the oil wells and gold mines previously, a reference to mining is made. She compares her loins with diamonds. The diamonds are a symbol of something luxurious and expensive. She dances like she has riches of treasure in her loins. Stanza 8. Almost done. Hang in there, guys. In this stanza, the speaker finally refers to the past, the reason that she is oppressed and resented to this day. She calls slavery history's shame, and she proclaims that she will not be held down by the past, even if it is rooted in pain. There is a change in the rhythm, tone, rhyme, length of lines, and length of stanza. It is a reflection on a triumphant ending. The reference to racial discrimination become even more clear. The prepositions out and up emphasizes the fact that she is breaking free or breaking out. The huts in line 29 is a reference to the type of place black people lived in. The speaker finally refers to the past, which is the reason that she is oppressed and resented to this day. She calls slavery history's shame. She proclaims that she will not be held down by the past, even if it is rooted in pain. I am a black ocean is a metaphor. Water flows wherever it wants to. She says that she is as deep and powerful as the ocean, meaning she's unstoppable. If she wants to do something, she will do it. She is as strong and as majestic as the ocean, and the term black denotes her race. She is a powerful black woman. Stanza 9. The final longer paragraph consists of Angelou giving readers an introduction to her identity. Angelou says she is a black ocean holding in all the shame and pain of a race and her gender within her tide. However, all is not black in her world. She is able to emerge out of dark nights into the brightness of day, carrying with her the legacy of her ancestors and their hope of finding a new life in America when they arrived in that country as slaves. 7 out of the 15 lines of this last stanza consist of the 2 fundamental words of the poem as a whole: I rise. Thus, right until the end, Angelou maintains her tone of proud defiance while speaking up for the rights of African American women all over the United States and celebrating her African heritage. The speaker is taking a clear step forward, leaving behind the terrors of the past. The daybreak will bring sunshine and hope and clarity. The gift of her ancestors is resilience, a fighting spirit that refuses to give up. They fought for freedom and equality. She has attained it. While terror and fear tormented her ancestors, she has become sassy, haughty, and sexy. The speaker affirms her intention to rise above the past and fulfills the dreams and hopes of her slave ancestors. Their pain and suffering drives her to meet her full potential in life, which they were unable to do themselves. She will obtain freedom and equality. The repeated use of I rise in line 41 to 43 maintains the speaker's pride and defiance. It emphasizes her determination. She will not only endure, but she will prosper. Her spirit will not be broken. It celebrates her achievements and motivates anyone who reads the poem to overcome oppression. The words live, fight, and resist can all be used as synonyms for rise. That concludes our analysis of the poem Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. But before I go, let's have a quick look at a few possible questions, paying special attention to certain keywords in each question. In question 2a, they ask you to identify the figure of speech. By now, you need to know there is a huge difference between figure of speech and parts of speech. Parts of speech is woordsoorte in Afrikaans. For example, nouns, verbs, adverbs, etc. Figure of speech, on the other hand, are literally features found in poems like similes, metaphors, personification, etc. If they ask you to identify the figure of speech, it means you just have to name it. In question 2b, they ask you to explain the figure of speech. Now, you need to provide an answer worth 2 marks. If it is a comparison, you need to explain what is being compared to what and how these two things relate to one another. In other words, point out the similarities. Question 3 asks you to quote 2 consecutive words in stanza 1. Quote means a word from the poem. You copy from the poem. To indicate that you have indeed quoted from the poem, use quotation marks, or otherwise known as inverted commas. 2 consecutive words means you must have only 2 words, and the words must follow each other continuously in the poem. Synonyms for consecutive are succeeding or following or in succession or in a row. Question 6. The tone. Remember, you cannot say the mood or the tone of a grade 12 poem is sad or happy. Make sure you study the tone of each poem. Question 7. Quote 3 separate words. Here, you also need to quote from the poem, but separate means the words will not follow one another in the poem. It will not be one after the other. The words can be in line 3, 7, and 20, for example. At question 8, they ask you to use your own words. You should always answer your questions in your own words, unless they ask you to quote. Here, they have emphasized that you need to use your own words. They will therefore definitely not mark any quotes correct. Be sure to replace all the keywords with appropriate synonyms. Question 9a also asks you to identify the figure of speech, which means you just need to name the figure of speech. But note that in question 10, they ask you to identify and discuss a theme, which means that you need to do 2 things. First, identify the theme for 1 mark and then discuss the theme for 2 marks. Here are the suggested answers for the questions on the previous slide. I conclude with a few wise words from Maya. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. Don't complain. I pray that you will have the courage to change that which you have to change, whether it is your circumstances or yourself, or maybe both. Stay safe, guys. Cheers.